dive into the 6 myths. It's really interesting. We are in this industry talking about vitamins and supplements, and we ended up, all of the conversations that we ended up having were about these myths in our industry and our culture, and what's actually happening with that. And what's interesting is we have this $150 billion global supplement. Just, I mean, it's absolutely massive. In 2020, folks spent over $150 billion on supplements. And the reality is, most of them don't work. So we're going to dive into that and some of the biggest myths that are evolving around that. Really understanding nutritional supplements, why they work, why they don't work, what to look for, and what are some of the resources that we can actually dive into. So with that, let's dive in. So my name is Scott Jessen. I'm the Director of Product Development at Tennant Products. For those of you who don't know me, a little bit about us. This is a lot more than a job for us. You'll see as we continue to talk today, this is our passion, right? So we do go the extra mile to make available pure therapeutic grade ingredients that were originally only available to doctors, and now we make them available to everyone. At retail, we focus on only the highest quality natural ingredients in the most bioavailable form. It's a synergistic formula. We try to make sure that we have all of the specific cofactors present and that everything's in the right form. We'll get into that here in just a couple minutes. Family owned and operated, and ingredients matter. We know that. Each of us have a story, and that fight that we've had for our own healthcare is what we carry through directly to the product. So it's your body, it's your life. Ingredients matter. We feel the same way for our bodies, for ourselves, and we want to help translate that to you and each of your customers. So today we're going to dive into the 6 myths about supplements, 6 biggest myths, really. And initially we were going to make this about, this is a free document that we have on our webpage. It's about halfway down. Initially we were thinking, okay, well, it's the 10 myths or the 12 myths. And what we found is that it actually ended up being about a 30-page research paper that went through, and when we were just talking about the 6 different myths. So when we go into those, it's really, all vitamins and supplements are the same. So it doesn't really matter where I get it. I can get it on Amazon, I can get it from GNC, the end cap at Target, or a high-end nutraceutical company. Are they all the same? Or the second one, I can get all of the nutrients from my diet. Okay, we'll dive into that. The next one, my doctor knows best about my nutrition. This is a little cheeky, but we do have some data that really supports this, and some resources for that as well. I can trust the actual ingredients, what's actually listed on the bottle. We'll go over specifically how to read a label, what that looks like. Just because it has an FDA stamp or a GMP stamp means that it's safe and effective. We'll dive into that. And then I should have a cabinet full of supplements, which is really interesting because most folks that I've gotten a chance to speak with think, oh no, well, I don't take supplements or I don't take vitamins. But then we actually look into the closet or look into the cabinet and find somewhere between 8 and 12 bottles. Well, I'm having this just because, or I felt like I needed it, or just in case. So we're going to dive into that specifically. And then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A session at the end of that. So I mentioned that this is a huge industry, right? Last year, globally, we did over $150 billion. And in America alone, it's estimated that 77% of American adults use nutritional supplements. The question is, do they really work? And what surveys and studies continue to tell us is that they don't. And so why are we a supplement company telling you that supplements don't work? Well, we're going to dive into that. We're going to get into the specific myths. So the first myth, in that all supplements are the same quality. Well, the reality is not all supplements are created equal. Have you ever wondered, does it even matter what I take? Aren't all supplements the same? Well, this has got to do the trick, right? I mean, it's on sale, it's on the end cap, it's colorful, it's got a great label. It's got to be great, right? Or well, does it really need to cost that much? I mean, I can go to Costco and go buy a year's supply of vitamin B, and that's going to do the trick for me, right? The reality is our body processes everything that it encounters. And we need to be aware of what we consume, what it does, and where it comes from. And just because it says B12 on the bottle doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be safe and effective and work in our bodies. So when we talk about supplements, there are a couple of things to consider. We've talked about source a little bit. One of those things that really make a difference, two big words that come along with this, and one is methylation and one is bioavailability. So methylation and bioavailability are critical for the appropriate absorption of vitamins and nutrients provided in supplements. And without these, our bodies have to work a lot harder to achieve the intended result. In other words, methylation is how our body actually processes the things that it uses to create energy in our cells. It does this millions of times a day. And so if we are going to say that we have a product that's methylated, we actually give you a product that's a little further down the food chain, and we'll dive into that here in just a moment. Bioavailability is the ability for our bodies to actually use the broken down nutrients and be absorbed in the body. So in other words, it's the easiest form for our bodies to use. A lot of times, if we are taking an ingredient that's not methylated, our body's going to have to do some more work. Or if we have something that's not quite as bioavailable, then our body's going to have to do some more work. And sometimes we can end up with a negative effect or a net zero effect with that. So let's dive into synthetic versus natural. When we talk about supplements, and we know that the majority of the supplements on the market don't work, part of the reason why they don't work is because about 90% of them are synthetic. And when we're actually taking a synthetic, our body has to use its resources to be able to process it. And so if we're using something that's natural, our body can actually process it. It takes whatever's in its natural form, it knows exactly what to do with, and then it uses what it can, and there's nothing left over. If our body uses something that's synthetic, then our body can use some of that, but may not be able to break down all of that. We'll get into that in just a couple minutes here. The other thing that's a little bit controversial is GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. So when these are incredibly popular in our society and our nutrition as a whole, right? They're one of the things that have actually helped feed our nation. And the result is that we end up with some synthetic ingredients that our bodies may not know what to do with. And sometimes that ends up leading to additional supplements that have GMO ingredients or fillers or preservatives. The GMOs can be processed a lot of the time, but they can be more difficult to process. They don't function as well or the same as the natural resources. This is why we're having a difficult time actually processing vitamins and having vitamins that actually work. So methylation is a critical process for every person for optimal health. The challenge is about 40% of the population has difficulty with methylation. And so that means they have difficulties actually breaking down, let's say, a B vitamin, in what forms we can actually use that. So if we give that to a form that's already methylated and broken down, you're going to be able to use that. If you can't process it, not only will you not be able to process it, but it can even make you sick. So this is the methylation cycle. The supplements that work are going to be methylated and bioavailable. And the reason for that is that methylation is the process that will actually take you a little further down the line. So if you look in the center of the screen, you'll see MTHFR, and you look right above that and you'll see NADH. Well, NADH is niacin that's 4 steps down the line. And so in order for B3, which is your vitamin B3 that you'll see on any supplement facts label, you're going to see niacin or niacinamide. It actually has to go through niacin and niacinamide to NAD to NAD+, and then it ends up at NADH. But it has to go through each of those steps each time before it actually gets to NADH, which is what our body actually uses to help create energy. If we can give you that fast pass, essentially, right? So it's the form that your body is going to use. That's methylation in a nutshell, right? So that's when we say that a product is methylated, we're giving it to you a little further down the line. So in each one of these steps, there can be a methylated ingredient, which means that your body is going to be able to use it immediately rather than having to do additional work to do that. So methylated ingredients can expedite the metabolization process and thereby improve bioavailability. So when we're looking at vitamins, are they all created equally? No, they're not. But some of the things that we can actually look for are they methylated and are they bioavailable? Okay. Next myth. I can get all the nutrients from my diet. Well, Grandma Nellie used to say, well, I used to eat steak and potatoes and spinach and I was fine. Just eat your veggies, eat what's on your plate, clear your plate, and you shouldn't have an issue with this. Janice, do you have a poll?
I do. Okay, guys. So here's our first poll. Wait, I'm gonna. Okay, ready? So the question is, I can get all my daily requirements, my daily nutrients through a healthy diet? True or false? Does everybody see the poll? All right. Wow, we got a smart crew here.
Even if you're eating keto, gluten-free, paleo, Mediterranean, take your pick. Whole30.
Yeah. Awesome. Good job. So, okay, let me see. I'm going to share the results, show you how smart you guys are.
You guys are awesome.
You guys are awesome.
That's correct. So, what's interesting about this is that our food isn't quite as nutritious as it once was, right? So when we think about foods and we think about those tasty fruits and veggies, right? So you have, that rich, flavorful, right, fruit. Let's think of it as a tomato. You bite into that tomato, you can taste the layers, you can smell the layers. And that flavor and that flavor, that smell, that taste, those come from the nutrients in the soil. The challenge is those nutrients, those micro and trace nutrients in the soil aren't quite the same as what they used to be. And so we refer to those nutrients as minerals, vitamins, electrolytes, but our bodies need them. And if we look at the studies in the USDA nutritional values, they've gone down significantly. And so the challenge is we dive into the nutritional values and we see that when Grandma Nellie actually used to eat her spinach and potatoes and steak, that it had a lot more nutrition. And even if you are eating healthy and you are eating organically, you may not be getting the specific nutrients that you need, which means that you may have to supplement with some additional nutritional supplementation. An example of this is that if we look at the USDA nutritional values, 1 leaf of spinach from 1975 is the same as 10 leaves of spinach from 2018. That's quite a bit. So you have to eat 10 times as much spinach. May not be as comfortable on the diet or on the belly as we dive into that. The next thing that you might say is, Scott, well, I eat healthy, I eat local, I eat organic, right? Aren't I getting the best nutrients? Well, the challenge with that is that organic farms still use pesticides. And this is one thing that kind of blew my mind when we actually dove in and took a look at this. That organic farms are still allowed to use pesticides. They just can't use quite as much or the same quantities or the same ones, but we're still using pesticides that are decreasing the nutrient population in the soil. The other thing to pay attention to is cross-pollination, right? So we have organic fields next to conventional fields. We have the same wind or bees that are going to pollinate both crops. That can be challenging. The other thought of that is fertilizers. So heavy use of fertilizers that are actually not letting the land rest and not allowing the micro and trace nutrients to be able to regroup and develop. Those pesticides actually knock those off. So the USDA or US Department of Agriculture's annual studies actually confirm all of this data. When we look at the data, we see that apples, vitamin A is down 41%, sweet peppers, vitamin C is down 31%, broccoli, calcium, and vitamin A are down 50%, and the list goes on. And so when we look at even our organic, I mean, yes, there are going to be some microclimates where if you were growing your own things in on your own property and you're able to curate the soil, you may have an exception to that personally. But on whole, when we're looking at the population, even when we're looking at organic nutrients, organic and conventionally grown nutrients, they're significantly less than what they were. So when we think about our current farming practices, we know that our current farming practices seek to optimize agricultural production. It's at a cost. The U.S. plant crops only contain a fraction, as much as 80% less of the humic and fulvic substances, which are vitamins, minerals, amino acids, phytochemicals, electrolytes, and other minerals that were actually contained roughly a century ago. So we're continuing to lose those nutrients. The question is, how do we replenish them? And the answer is in humic and fulvic acid. So humic and fulvic acids actually convert the inorganic material into organic material. So if you think about everything that's in soil and how that actually can be used in a plant, as an example, humic and fulvic actually break down the inorganic materials and then absorb those and then help transport all of those nutrients throughout each portion of the plant. When we eat those plants, then we actually receive the same properties, those same vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and are able to disperse those throughout our cells. The challenge is, if we don't have those in the soil, then we're not going to get the nutrients that we need, which we need to have present to be able to create healthy, new cells. So you can think of these things as humic and fulvic acids. You can think of them as micro and trace nutrients. However you want to think about them, we need to make sure that we're actually able to increase these in value across the board.
Oh, do you want to do your poll? Wait, you want to do your poll? Okay, I'm gonna launch the poll really quick. Okay, so question: how many hours of nutrition training does a standard MD receive in the years of intense education?
200 hours, 100 hours, 50 hours, 25 hours.
Oh, you guys are just too smart.
What's interesting about this is it seems rather alarming, but it makes sense. So when you have doctors or general practitioners that show up and you say, hey, look, I'm on this supplement, or I have questions about this supplement, or hey, what do you think about this? And you show up with this new protein shake or this new amino acid, you show it to them and you say, well, hey, what do you think about this? And they say, well, I don't really know about that. No, why don't you just hold off? I can't advise you one way or the other. It totally makes sense because it's kind of a cyclical cycle, right? Doctors aren't trained on nutrition. There's a bunch of different studies out here, and we just listed a couple of them. But one of the studies actually states, and it was a national study, that on average, the average medical doctor receives less than 24 hours of nutritional instruction over the course of his or her training. So that was kind of mind-blowing. And then the next one, when we were looking at Harvard Business Review, less than 20% of medical schools require a single course of nutrition. Okay, that's also another mind-blowing thing. But when you think about this and you think about the practical application, when you show up and if you give somebody a canister of Restore and they show up and they say, well, hey, what do you think about this? And they look at it and go, well, hey, it looks like there are a lot of ingredients. There might be a lot of stuff in there. And well, I don't know. I mean, it's over the daily values, so that's got to be good, right? Well, I don't know. On second thought, I'm going to back off. It totally makes sense because doctors are unfamiliar with the supplements. Supplements are an unregulated industry, and we live in a very litigious culture. So, of course, they're going to err on the side of caution and say, well, hey, why don't you just back off? I don't know about that. We're going to just take a step back, and you can try that on your own, but I can't advise you. So the bottom line with this is that if you have specific concerns about your health, please seek your practitioner's advice. If you have specific concerns about nutrition, reach out to a nutritionist, a dietitian, or a medical doctor who has decades of experience with nutrition or an additional nutritional degree. So this was kind of mind-blowing too when we actually dove in and started looking at the research. But it made sense because we're trying to have conversations about how great the product might be or how well it works with the body. They say, well, no, I'm sorry, I'm out. I can't do that. It's a little bit of an explanation behind that. So we can reach out to our healthcare practitioner.
Okay, hold on just a second. I think Renee has a question. Renee, I'm going to open you up. Do you want to ask a question? I think you might be muted. Renee, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
There you are.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I was muted, but yeah, that's weird. Before I couldn't even see the mute that button, but no, I'm good. Thank you though.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
All right, so diving back in, myth number 4, I can trust the actual listed ingredients. So this is where it can get a little tricky because ingredients can be tricky. What's listed on the bottle of supplements is actually what's inside them is an extremely important detail, and it's crucial to understand. You may be able to trust the wording on the bottle, but you may not be able to trust the actual quality or the type of ingredients that are there. An example of this is the supplement facts that we have on there. So we'll dive into this, and then we'll dive into the supplement facts that you see there. Words matter, right? And if we think of this in terms outside of supplements, and we think about things in terms of, let's say, hiking, right? So hiking shoes. If you buy a pair of waterproof hiking boots and they are waterproof, they're going to say that they're waterproof because they need to advertise that they're waterproof, and they spend extra money on that. If you're going to buy a pair of Gore-Tex waterproof boots, then you're going to see that it's advertised as Gore-Tex on there. That's the registered trademark. They have specific licensing requirements. They have specific studies that have gone along with developing that product. And it's essentially a special product that they've used to place inside of that. So companies are going to pay more for that. And then there's more research and more studies and more things that actually go along with that. Bottom line is that if there is a better product that's used, the companies that are selling that are going to elaborate on that and explain that. And we'll see that as we dive into the specific labels. So typically, if a company is paying more for ingredients, it will advertise them and call them out, either on their label or on their website. FDA sees your website, a supplement company's website, and label as the same thing. So any claims that you're making, they're the same across the board. Other ingredients we also need to pay attention to. Our body metabolizes everything we consume, and so other ingredients often includes additional fillers, flavorings, preservatives, or excipients that can be synthetic, GMO, or even toxic. You can have a fantastic supplement facts, but if you're using something that is potentially toxic or GMO in the other ingredients because it's easier on the manufacturing equipment, then you now have a product that may not work as well, or can potentially leave some toxic residue. So if we take a look at the supplement facts, this is a very popular B complex on the market. It's actually Amazon's #1 bestseller. And when we take a look at this, we see, okay, well, vitamin C is listed as ascorbic acid. Okay, right, we have a good value with that. We have thiamine, this thiamine mononitrate. We have riboflavin, niacin. Remember we talked about niacin on the methylation chart, niacin, then niacinamide, then NAD, then NAD+, and NADH. And then vitamin B6, which is one of the vitamins that most Americans are deficient in, like severely deficient, as pyroxidine hydrochloride, folate, as folic acid, and then B12 as cyanocobalamin. We can keep going down the list. One thing I want to point out here is that we have our cyanocobalamin. All B12s are not created equally. When we have cyanocobalamin, we actually have the cyanocobalamin. Our body knows what to do with the cobalamin, not necessarily what to do with the cyano part. That actually can become cyanide. Sits in our bodies. If you can't process it, you don't methylate well, that will actually attach itself to a fat cell, and then we have to figure out how to actually detox from that. So it looks like a great value. It's about $11 a bottle. We'll give you a 3-month supply absolutely fantastic value at face value. But when we look at this, every ingredient that's in here is synthetic. So when we take a look at what's actually happening here, we have a quick list of the synthetic vitamins and then the B vitamins. And you should have access to this presentation as well, so that you can actually go back and take a look at these forms. The key thing that you want to look for, phosphorylated or methylated in the natural forms that our bodies are going to be able to process. So we have vitamin B1 as thiamine mononitrate or thiamine hydrochloride. Both of those are the synthetic version. We're using benfipure or benfotiamine, which is thiamine pyrophosphate. There's a little bit of a cost difference there. So when you ask, well, why does this actually cost so much? It costs so much because it's actually in the form that our bodies can process, so there isn't anything that's left over. We can use it immediately, and then you're going to feel the desired effect. B2 is riboflavin hydrochloride. Again, there's that HCl versus the riboflavin 5-phosphate. There's a phosphate, phosphorylated. That's the phosphorylated or methylated version. B3 is niacin or niacinamide. Again, that's that. It actually turns into NADH. If you go 4 steps down the line, we actually have the NADH, which is the natural version. Let's skip down to folate. And we'll see folate as folic acid. Everybody knows that we need folic acid. Here's the kicker. If you're one of the 40% of the population that doesn't methylate well, and you have an MTHFR SNP, then it's for folic acid. And that's where 40% of the population actually comes in. So it means you're not going to be able to process the folic acid, and you need the methylated version of that. That methylated version is 5-MTHF. We're using the registered trademark Metafolin. Bit of a cost difference there. So when you think, okay, well, does this product actually work? Is it going to make me sick? Is it going to make me feel better? What are we actually looking at? That's one of the things that we're actually looking at. And then finally, B12, cyanocobalamin breaks down to cyanide and cobalamin versus the methylated version, which is methylcobalamin and dinosocobalamin. So when we take a look at our labels, can you find the synthetic ingredients?
I think I'm gonna see. I think I can make everybody a panelist. So I'm gonna see if I can do that. I've allowed everybody to be able to speak.
Awesome.
You're all allowed to talk, so you can unmute yourself and share. I think,
awesome. Well, in the interest of time, we'll dive in real quick. So we look and we see we have vitamin C as ascorbic acid. We know that that's synthetic. Our bodies can process it, but it actually leaves a little bit left over. We have the thiamine as the thiamine mononitrate. There's a mononitrate. That was one of the things that was a trigger for the synthetic version. We have the niacin as niacinamide, and the riboflavin, which is not called out, right? So remember the Gore-Tex example where things would be spelled out afterwards. If this was actually a methylated version, it would say riboflavin 5-phosphate. It's just riboflavin as it is. We have our vitamin B6 as pyroxidine hydrochloride. There's the hydrochloride or the HCl. We don't see the phosphate or phosphorylated on that, so we know that's synthetic. Folate is folic acid, vitamin B12 as cyanocobalamin. If we take a look at Dr. Tennant's Restore label, just as an example for reference, we have the vitamin C complex. So it's not just ascorbic acid, but it's polyphenol C with non-GMO ascorbic acid and organic polyphenols and bioflavonoid, right? You can see that it's whole vitamin C. Instead, it's actually calling out. It's the Gore-Tex example of what's actually calling out what's in the label. B1, benfotiamine is benfipure instead of thiamine. Riboflavin is riboflavin 5-phosphate. NADH instead of niacin. Pyroxidine 5-phosphate, or folate as metafolin, which is methyl tetrahydrofolate. If you want to say that 10 times fast, or you can just say MTHF. As we go through the list, these are things just to keep in mind when we start looking at labels. And the thing that we want to make sure is that in the end result, we want to make sure that we always have the highest quality natural vitamin over the synthetic. And the majority of manufacturers on the market are not actually putting in the bioavailable to methylated form. And they might put in methylcobalamin. It's getting a lot more popular. The challenge is there's still a whole lot of other synthetics that our bodies can't process. So we want to make sure that we're able to look out for those. So when we think about, well, why things don't work, we want to make sure that we're able to trust that. So we jump into the next myth. I can trust the FDA and GMP certification. So this is a big thing. If you can put a label on your product that says, it has the FDA label, has the GMP or CGMP certified label, there's a presumption that it's safe. And the challenge is it may not be. So unfortunately, just because it carries an FDA or GMP certification, it does not guarantee the quality, the safety, or the effectiveness and how it will actually work with our bodies. What it does guarantee is that the FDA certification actually means that the benefits, the known benefits of the product outweigh the known risks for the intended use, which is kind of a good thing, right? However, the FDA is not authorized to review dietary supplement products for safety and effectiveness before they're marketed. So there's the kicker. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is that the FDA regulates what and how statements are made on supplement labels to discourage supplement companies from making untrue claims. The onus is also on of the safety and effectiveness is on the manufacturers and distributors. So that means the people that are manufacturing the product and making the product are on that, but it's essentially unregulated with the FDA. So it can still carry that label and be totally synthetic. Your body might not be able to process it, but it's still, produced in a safe manner, or the intended result for the majority of the population can be better than the unintended consequence. The GMP certification or CGMP certification that came out a couple of years ago is good manufacturing practice. What this means is that you have either good manufacturing practice or current good manufacturing practices. It's essentially the same. It just depends on how folks want to present it. And that certifies that the steps used to create and manufacture the vitamin or product are in line with the FDA's requirements. Now, the FDA has amazing requirements to make sure that all of the steps are checked in the manufacturing process. The challenge is you can essentially put what you want in the product. It may or it may not work, but it checks all of the boxes for the FDA's process. So that's when we're looking at the unregulated industry and the supplements that we say, okay, well, we need to actually create a document that can help create some education and awareness for this, and that's where the 6 myths came from. So just because it has the FDA and GMP certifications doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe and effective or that it will work for you. We want to make sure that we're looking for the bioavailable form, the methylated form, and the natural form that our bodies can process. Okay, last one. I should have a cabinet full of supplements. This is interesting because most folks, it's like a secret. Most folks don't want to say that I have a cabinet full of supplements, but in the back of their minds, a lot of folks do. And so I had a conversation with my best friend who said, well, I don't take supplements and I don't have this and I don't have that. He got a cold the next week. I happened to be over at his house. He opened up his cabinet and he had 12 bottles of vitamins, and he ended up just throwing down vitamin C and this and that. I'm like, dude, I thought you said that you didn't actually have a cabinet full of supplements. And he's like, well, it's just good to have. So I guess the question that we want to ask is, why are you taking supplements in the first place, right? Did a doctor tell you that you need to take supplements? Are you taking them because you think you have to take multivitamins? Are you taking them just in case? Are you looking for a specific boost? Do you want to simply feel better? What's the whole point and why we're actually diving into this, right? One thoughtful exercise is to track how much you're currently spending on vitamins and health supplements. If you take a look in your cabinet and you pick up a bottle and you realize, oh, okay, well, I got this at Costco 3 months ago, and this was $15, and this was $30, and this is, folks on average have about $175 worth of supplements in their cabinet as it is. The questions that you need to ask for this exercise, though, are they in the right form? And do they have the right cofactors? And then ultimately, will they give me the desired results that I'm looking for? And we'll talk about cofactors next. But really, most folks are looking for a supplement to achieve a desired result. And our bodies still have to work to achieve that result. And sometimes if it's not in the right form, it can end up in a net zero effect. So let's talk about cofactors for a minute. You can say, Scott, okay, that's great. I get it. I need to make sure that things are in the right form. The challenge is, in order for things to be bioavailable, sometimes they need another ingredient. And so we want to make sure that it's not only methylated and bioavailable, but it's in the best form. And then we have the cofactors present for that. So we all know that we need vitamin D3, right? Everybody knows we need vitamin D3, especially after COVID. Everybody's like, okay, well, yeah, we need vitamin D3. And sure, we can get it from the sun, but we certainly need to supplement that. Everybody also knows that we need calcium. Well, what's interesting about calcium is that if you take calcium by itself, you actually need 20 times more. I'm going to repeat that. If you take calcium by itself, you need 20 times more calcium to be able to absorb it than if you take calcium with vitamin D3. So when we talk about cofactors, a cofactor is something that's going to help another thing absorb. And so vitamin D3, K2, and calcium all work really well together. And the reason for that is that we know that our bodies need calcium. We need it for strong bones. We need it for our teeth. It helps with our muscles and squeezing and relaxing the muscles. It's great for cardiovascular health. But if we just take calcium, we can end up with some significant issues. If we take calcium with vitamin D3, the D3 actually makes it go specifically into our bones and out of our joints. If we take vitamin D3 and K2 with calcium, then it actually makes sure that it goes into our bones and stays out of our arteries. So that's the cool thing about K2. And there was a cool study that came out that showed that, specifically noted as the Rotterdam study. So when we think about cofactors, it's one thing that's going to help another thing actually absorb and be more bioavailable. Our bodies can process calcium, but we just need significantly more if we're going to be able to process it without D3. So when we look at additional examples of other cofactors, some things that you might be familiar with, one is iodine. So Dr. Tennant will say iodine needs cofactors like selenium and zinc to work correctly. You can't just substitute iodine by itself and get the results that you need. If you just take the liquid by itself and you drop that into your mouth, it's probably not going to have the same effect as if you're actually taking the capsule that has vitamin C, selenium, zinc, and B1, because those are the cofactors that iodine actually needs to absorb. Iron also needs vitamin A and C to be able to absorb. So if you have an iron deficiency, then the question is, are you able to absorb your vitamin A or your vitamin C? And then if we're looking at the bioavailability of vitamin C, the bioavailability increases for vitamin C with bioflavonoids and polyphenols. So we want to make sure that we have things in the appropriate form and in the appropriate factor with the cofactors necessary to be able to absorb. And when we're looking at supplements across the board, if they don't have all of these things, it's exactly why they don't work. So when we look at the future of healthy supplements, in the end, this is about your body, your health, and your vitality. We want to make sure that you have the best life, you have the best opportunity to do the things that you want to do. This picture is a picture of me, pretty close to the top of Mount Baldy. It's a local mountain here next to me. And 2 weeks ago, I got to complete a bucket list. My goal was to ride from my house, which is close to the beach, about 10 miles away from the beach, ride to Mount Baldy, ride up Mount Baldy, and then ride back down to the beach, and then ride home. So it was, snow to sea, right? And it's about 130 miles. I work. I'm not riding as much as I would like. It was a big deal. It was a big trip, bucket list trip, and I was able to do it. And the reason why I was able to do it was because I had appropriate nutrition. 3 years ago, I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. I had all kinds of health issues. I had all kinds of nutritional issues, and I had to reset and refocus on what I was doing with health, nutrition, and what I was actually putting into my body, right? I couldn't just eat a chimichanga and go ride my bike 100 miles and think that was okay anymore. We had to completely reset. But when we think about things, we know that the body can heal itself. The body can heal itself and it can live optimally. And so just because it's normal doesn't mean that it has to be okay. It means that you can have the life that you want to have. And the body never forgets how to heal itself. And when it runs correctly, it does heal itself. I'm living proof of that. And so I wanted to throw this picture in there. But when we're talking about vitamins and supplements, the reality is the majority of them don't work. And they don't work because they don't have the appropriate cofactors. They're not in the right form. Our bodies may not be able to process them, or our bodies may have to work harder to be able to process them. So I hope that this time was able to help. I hope that this document is able to help answer your questions and some of your customers' questions. We've learned that all vitamins and supplements are not of the same quality. Diet alone does not provide all the necessary nutrients. Doctors are wonderful for healthcare practitioner questions, but maybe not for nutrition specifically. And we need to do the research to find the best quality ingredients. The FDA and GMP certification does not necessarily mean that it's safe or effective for the ingredients, and that you really need to have a high quality supplement with the correct cofactors in order for it to be readily used.